serves as the president of KC Next, the Technology Council of Greater Kansas City. And most of recently, though, Ryan served as director of the Midwest Division of the Angel Capital Group, where he focused on recruiting angel investors to the Greater Kansas City area to fund various ventures in the region. And prior to his time with the Angel Capital Group, Ryan served as a development officer for the College of Business Administration at K-State and spent time as a consultant with Pennington & Company in Lawrence, Kansas. Additionally, Ryan serves on the board of directors for the Technology Council of North America and is a member of the Executive Mentorship Program for the College of Business at K-State. Ryan further demonstrates the values he places on staying involved in the community by supporting several other organizations in the region. And I can extend that just a little bit. We recently received a U.S. Department of Labor grant that's going to help us integrate more partnerships throughout this region, specifically working with IT skilled individuals and retooling of that, but connecting them again with the resources in IT. So of course we're in that spot in our program with the Health Information Systems in a wonderful position to bring the worlds of healthcare and IT together. So I just thought, what a great opportunity while we have all of you together to hear a little bit different perspective of outside of just healthcare itself, but the IT industry and what's going on and all the work that's being done to bring more folks in and get us connected. Ryan serves on now, as he's going to be starting to, our new TAC Grant Advisory Board. So we appreciate his time and really value his expertise in this area. So I will let Ryan take it from here.
Thank you, Deb.
Yep.
Okay, so I will talk about a number of things during my presentation. I'll tell you what the heck KC Next is and what we do, and I'll give you some very broad macro sense about where our tech industry is as a region in Kansas City. I'll talk about things like entrepreneurship, the Sprint Accelerator, how do we get more talent to move to Kansas City, and then I'll kind of bring that back down specifically to the healthcare world to relate to this conference today. But at any point during my presentation, since we don't have a huge group, if you got a question, feel free to ask. I'm going to make this conversational too. So I'll get started here by telling you a little bit about KC Next. So we're like a trade association for the tech industry. We're nonprofit. We have a board of directors. In fact, Tim is on our board, so it's good to see a lot of familiar faces out here. And we're a membership-based organization. We have about 130 member companies, not all tech companies. Some are educational institutions like JCCC and One Neck IT Solutions, and on and on and on. So we started this thing about 3 years ago with very few companies and very little money. The technology industry has exploded during that time frame. I think we timed this pretty well. So we appreciate the support. I'm looking around the room. There's a number of your organizations that are members, and we thank you. A large part of my role is selling Kansas City. And it certainly doesn't hurt to have your team in the World Series. It's amazing how much of a business development help those boys in blue are. And we're constantly selling this region to companies that are considering expanding or moving to Kansas City. So I'm in economic development too. And what I do is I get a chance to show those companies the assets of our region, not only for the companies, the educational institution, and a lot of times we talk about lifestyle. Kansas City has not been excelling in how we've told our story to the rest of the country. Let me take a little trip down history lane, or memory lane, sorry, and show you how we used to sell Kansas City in 1979.
There's a city with more public green space than San Francisco, including the second largest urban park in America, with more fountains than any place but Rome, more boulevard miles than Paris, and cleaner air than Honolulu. Kansas City, one of the few livable cities left.
Let's be honest. How many times have you called this place the city of fountains? Maybe you've heard that conversation about Rome or boulevards. None of it's true. We made it all up. And we've been using that story for literally the last 30 plus years. Now, I was not alive in 1979, but that does not look like I missed out on much, right? It's changed a lot. Here's how we tell our story today. every time I see that video, I forget that we live in that town. That does not look like Kansas City, does it? When I grew up in far west Olathe. My dad worked for Western Auto, and that's what brought us here. We never went into the city. My mother was convinced it was extremely dangerous and not worth going to. But now, as a young person growing up and living in the city, it is amazing what has changed. And that's really who we're trying to attract to this region. So, as many of you know, we are in a war for young people. And we are fighting every other city and region for those people. Because by the year 2020, millennials will make up about 75% of the total workforce. They're extremely important. Now, they're entitled and all these other things, we can talk about them, but they're very important to the future of Kansas City. So we have to be able to recruit them. And so if you don't know what millennial is, and you guys, well, there's a lot of educators in the room, you're probably tired of talking about millennials, right? But for the tech industry, they're even more important. Technology companies will only exist in cities where young, talented people want to live and work. Streetcars are not about moving people. They don't even move that many people, to be honest with you. But they are economic drivers, and they are our sales team for recruiting young, talented people to Kansas City. So, it's unfortunate when ballots like that recently get churned down by the city, because I don't think we've done a really good job of educating Kansas Cityans on just how important things like public transportation are. Young people don't want to drive. They want to live in a neighborhood where they can walk to most of the things they need or want. I know, it's crazy, but it is true. And we've got to build those neighborhoods. If we don't, we lose. We also have to build a pipeline of that technology talent. I'll get to that in a second, too. Here's a statistic that we look at a lot. We know that young people pick a city before they pick a job. So as KC Next and with a lot of our member companies, one of the values of membership is we will go and we'll present to your companies about how to sell Kansas City. Because if you talk about BBQ and Jazz, you're really missing out on what's going on in our city. And that's often the story that we tell. And also, you have to customize that presentation to who you're talking to. Young people don't really care about BBQ and Jazz. Those are known knowns about Kansas City, specifically barbecue. I mean, the whole country knows we have barbecue here, right? There's no reason to talk about it. And there's no reason to get in debate about what's the best. I think Oklahoma Joe's is. Really care about their community and how they can contribute. So if your company or your organization is not active in that, what are you doing? I mean, that is extremely important. So I'm kind of dressed today like a hybrid of our tech industry, right? Because we got some of our member companies that wear suits to work and some that wear flip-flops. I was making fun of Doug from Sprint earlier because I've never seen Doug wear a suit before. And that Sprint Accelerator, if you think they're wearing suits over there, you're far wrong, because it is literally flip-flops, jeans, and a t-shirt. It doesn't matter what temperature it is. It's things like that that matter. I mean, if you've ever wanted to have the conversation about dress code in your office, now's the time to bring it up, because young people, again, they're not going to wear suits to work. They're probably not going to wear business casual either. So things to consider, things that you need to be ready to adapt to. Music's a big part of this. And in Kansas City, we're very lucky because we have an exploding music scene. I'm sure all of you are really closely connected to this. You could probably rattle off a number of local artists in Kansas City, right? Yeah, there are a couple that can. We are turning into a little music capital of the Midwest. We have a number of young up-and-coming bands and a music scene and a radio station that caters to that. It's 90.9 The Bridge, owned by KCPT, so it's essentially some public radio too. It's what's making Kansas City cool, and they're very drawn to that music. It's not the kind of music you hear on other radio stations, but it is certainly a unique asset for us. But our biggest advantage as a region is where we're located. We often forget this. Our biggest asset is being right in the middle of the country. And I think that that's something that we need to keep at the top of mind. No, we don't have mountains and oceans. Probably not going to happen in our lifetimes, so we'll just get over that. The places that have mountains and oceans are very difficult places to do business. The issues that we have with talent and workforce are compounded to an extreme exponential out there. In fact, I was just in Silicon Valley with the Kansas City Chamber's Leadership Exchange, and this came up a lot. The same conversations we have here about the ability to recruit, retain, and grow their own talent. They're dealing with those same struggles. But they're dealing with more complex issues because every day they worry that their best developer is going to hop to the next newest, coolest startup. We don't have those problems here yet. Maybe down the road we will, but we'll learn and we'll adapt. They also have problems where they can go across the street if they have a bad day and make $20,000 more than they did yesterday, and they just keep doing it. And we're starting to see some of that here in Kansas City. It's like an arms race. But certainly don't have the issues that they have on the coast with what it's like to do business. The costs of doing business on the coast are reaching a threshold where companies are saying enough, and they're going to move. I'm biased, but I want them to move to Kansas City, especially if they're a technology company. Because the story we can tell now is not just affordability. That's not sexy. I'm going to be honest with you. Companies really don't care. Technology companies especially don't care. The only thing they care about is talent. They don't care about tax incentives. They don't care about affordability. They care about talent. Number of companies here that are drawing those folks to Kansas City, and it's extremely important that we keep every single one of these companies here. To think that Sprint will be here long term, it's a little risky right now. It's totally in the cards. Any day, their new CEO could say, we're moving to California. It's closer to Japan. That's where Masayoshi's son lives in Palo Alto. He's the owner of SoftBank, and that could happen any day. It's a very real concern. Recently, you may have saw too that Sprint laid off about 475 people. Most of them were executives and tech professionals. I'm sure they're having a hard time finding a job because I'll get to that in a second. There's a lot of openings. But what's going on here in Kansas City right now is exactly what happened in Seattle in the 1990s. There was this really amazing revolution of music, and that whole grunge phase at the same time allowed them to scale companies like Microsoft and Starbucks. Anytime there's a music or food revolution, technology is right behind it because they are right closely connected together. Arts and creativity are usually always right there together. Fast forward a little bit. Same thing happened in Austin, Texas. And you probably hear about Austin a lot now as a tech hub. And we're in those same conversations too. But South by Southwest, if you're not familiar with that conference, it's a tech conference, a music conference, and a film conference. It draws like 100,000 people to Austin, mostly young, creative people. And that has made Austin cool. Austin was a very weird, interesting place before. It also helps having a 60,000 student campus with a great engineering program right there in the middle of your town, and then a state capital that draws a young workforce too. Tech folks figured that out pretty quickly that there was going to be some talent in Austin. And that's why they have Cisco, Apple, 3M, on and on and on, a huge portfolio of those companies. But really it was the food and music revolution in the early 2000s that brought all of those companies with it. Also Dell. I don't know how I forgot Dell. Dell's like the one most popular company in Austin. We're next. We invested more in arts and creativity than any other city did during the recession. Almost all of our competing markets withdrew resources from those assets when the country hit a crisis. We did not. We doubled down. We built the Kauffman Performing Arts Center. The Crossroads Arts District started taking off with all this organic grassroots effort. If you haven't been to a First Friday down there, go. It's so cool. And you'll see people from all walks of life. But it's a really cool experience. It's a really cool Kansas City experience. And with what's going on here, especially from an entrepreneurship standpoint, is very unique because this is a very easy place to scale and grow a company. And many of them are following the strengths of our tech industry specifically, which is healthcare, telecommunications, on and on and on. So they are playing to the strengths of our region. So for the numbers folks in the audience, here we go. You ready? This is our tech industry at a snapshot. About 38,000 or so in the tech industry. Now this is public data, so take it for what that is, but this is as close as I can get you to real numbers. If I was to compare this to Silicon Valley, it would be about 440,000 tech professionals. So let's not even do that. Let's not even compare Kansas City to Silicon Valley. We can't. We shouldn't, and really we probably need to slap people on the wrist that do. However, we compete with them all the time. There are professionals that are moving to Kansas City from that area all the time because a one-bedroom apartment in Silicon Valley, so that would be between San Jose and San Francisco, which is a bigger debate, but that's where we'll describe it today. 1 bedroom, 800 square feet, $4,000 a month, if you can find it. So if you're a young professional, you're not making $200,000 a year. Very few of them do. I don't know how they get by. Nobody knows how they get by. I'm sure their parents are paying for it in some way, shape, or form. And Visa and MasterCard are happy to help oblige with their bills too. But let's look at pay. If you have a young student in your household and they're not pursuing a tech degree, they must hate money. And there's tons of openings. I'll get to that too. But these are very well-paying jobs. And companies like Cerner, if you're an engineer, will start you like $65,000 a year with a 4-year degree. Now, they still want 4-year degrees, so that's important. There are other roles at some of those big companies where you don't have to do that. In fact, many of them have moved away. They love the fact that Johnson County has a program they can go through quickly and become very skilled and trained, because they want you to immediately get into the workforce, because things change really fast in technology. And unless you're in it every day, you can't keep up. So they really want you to get that base level education, get into the workforce, and then they'll take you from there. And many times they'll pay for you to go and continue your education too. So anyways, that's what it really starts at, is about $65,000 a year. Many of these companies, they'll let you work from home, they'll let you work from the beach, they don't care, they need you, they want you, and they'll do everything they can to keep you. So even if they're passionate about things like advertising, if you have a tech background, digital media and digital advertising are taking off, some of the fastest growing. That's very important. Even if you're passionate about healthcare, learning a technical language and skill alongside of that degree makes you so employable, it is crazy. It's amazing the opportunities that are there for you. So our industry in Kansas City too. The national average for females in this workforce is about a little less than 20%. So this is still very much a male-dominated industry. So if you know of a young woman, this is exactly the kind of industry that you would want to encourage them to look at, because they make way better project managers than men. Why is that funny? I don't get it. Companies want more women in technology. I don't know how we encourage them, but I know it's really intimidating when they go to a class, they're the only female there. So I don't know how we solve some of these problems. I want to try, because we've got to encourage more women to pursue technology degrees. It's very important for the future. So we do have a younger industry here, as you can tell by this data. It's not uncommon. Typically, more young folks are drawn into that industry. So let's talk about job openings. I just had a chance to share this with the Business Journal in regards to what happened with Sprint. Because the folks that have these tech skills and they have experience doing it are not going to have any problem finding a job. They're laid off from Sprint one day. If they're still laid off or unemployed in the next 2 weeks, they need to call me. And if you know any of those folks, because there are 620 companies hiring for 2,300 open positions in technology. We are so far behind in being able to fill this skills gap. Companies are trying anything to get folks here. They'll pay 20% of their first year's salary if a recruiter can find somebody, even if they only stick around for 6 months. It's that important to them. If they can't find that talent here in Kansas City, they won't stick around. And many of them will decide to offshore a lot of that development, which has many challenges in doing that. They really want those folks to be in their office and be an integral part of their team. Big revolution going on where you're seeing in the C-level suite of many companies, the technologist is there, because they're so important to their company. And I get a chance to go and visit with a number of companies in Kansas City, some tech, some not. But I always tell them, Everbrade's a technology company. Shut your email down for one day and tell me how it works. We're all in technology, right? And a lot of what we do too is sell Kansas City on a national level. We have really begun to tell this tech story. In fact, we've hired a consultant in New York City to place these stories with the national media. So whenever you read about Kansas City's tech industry, or we're listed as a top 5 or top technology hub, or anything about Google Fiber and things like the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, on and on, it didn't just happen. We either paid for it or replaced it. These are things we didn't do in the last 30 years. And now Kansas City is consistently being recognized as one of the up-and-coming or top technology cities in America. Because we looked at it and pretty much said, okay, the Midwest is totally open for the taking. Cities like Chicago has a very tough business and civic environment up there. our really big competitive markets this Midwest area is Dallas, and then sometimes Denver. And then we compete with Phoenix a lot, even though they're not in the Midwest. But anyway, so PC Magazine had a great article about our city, as well as Entrepreneur Magazine, that startups are cool, startups are sexy. We want to tell their stories because they're the ones that are revolutionizing the world that we live in. Many of them are healthcare focused in Kansas City. And I know you heard from Doug earlier, and I'll talk a little bit about why that's important. But Travel and Leisure loves us. Travel and Leisure keeps writing more and more stories about Kansas City, everything from barbecue to technology, and we love them for it. And then if you subscribe to Wired, which is one of the most well-read publications in technology, they had this graphic up early last year, and Google Fiber alone, that project has brought us $10 or $20 million worth of PR. It's just incredible what that has done for us. But poor Provo, they're kind of in the bottom corner there. And it's amazing when they put food, music, and Google Fiber. Those things matter. If you're in the business of recruiting tech folks and you're not talking about Google Fiber, that's a feather in our cap. No other city has it. Even Austin, Texas doesn't have it yet. Now, Google's pretty much guaranteed they'll have it in there by the end of the year, but it's not there yet. And like I mentioned too, so this project alone has been incredible for Kansas City. We can really look back to when they announced this as a critical point. I was just discussing at the table over lunch that we didn't know how we were going to keep that train rolling. When this launched, we immediately got tons of PR. Kansas City had basically our golden moment to really shine. We didn't know how we would keep this going. But it has been incredible, the amount of wins that we've had since Google Fiber. Companies like Cisco have announced a living learning lab where companies can come in, anyone that has a smart city technology, they're implementing sensors all up and down the streetcar line. And smart city technology is huge in the tech world. And those companies will move to Kansas City and Cisco will let them play on their network, which just doesn't happen. A lot of these smart city technologies, they don't have a place to go launch because no city's really doing this. But Cisco will launch that lab here in Kansas City. That's another one. It also really helps when we win the MLS championship and when we win the World Series. That really helps, believe it or not. All that PR, all that marketing brings people and companies to Kansas City. Here's an example of a company that moved last year from Silicon Valley. It's a cool technology. Anyone ever seen one of these? They're so cool. We got one in our office, and it never gets old playing with this thing. So it's like Skype on wheels. You log in, your face pops up, you drive it to meetings. And it's great when I travel. I log back in, I freak out the people in our office. But it's been great from a business development standpoint to give companies tours of Kansas City, show them office space. We can make all those things happen with this technology. But regardless, they chose Kansas City over a number of different options. Their founder was one of the first people at Google. They're based in Palo Alto. He's one of those multi-Google billionaires. And they knew they had to be a place, they had to pick a city with a lot of bandwidth. And Google Fiber was the leading driver. Now, little did they know that it's really not everywhere. It's mostly for the home, and they didn't care. The minute they stepped in Kansas City, like a lot of people do, the first time they come here, they say, I had no idea. Personally, I get a little upset about that because like we spend a lot of time and money trying to tell you about this, right? But we can consistently blow them away, and they're coming here in droves. Another example of a company that chose to come here from Omaha. They have a unique platform. Sorry, it's kind of getting cut off here, but basically they're like an online town hall where before politicians would go to a town hall and they listen to the people, but really they were listening to the only people that show up to town halls, so they're usually very one-sided. And this allows the community to really engage online regarding issues or things like streetcars, which actually they had a Mind Mixer campaign for that. Anyways, they are going to be hiring a lot more than 85 people. But they specifically chose Kansas City over Omaha and Silicon Valley because they thought, like a lot of companies do, they were more likely to find the talent that they needed here than any of those other cities. So that talent conversation is very important. I already mentioned this one a little bit, but again, this is going to be right along the streetcar line. You'll see more news and press about this over the next couple of months. It'll launch with the streetcar launch, which is, if you've been downtown, not there yet. Doug talked a lot about the Sprint Accelerator, but I'm sure he went into way more detail than what I will. But this has been so cool because of one reason. They are playing to the strengths of this region. These two companies, with these two industries, I should say, telecommunications and healthcare coming together, very important. This was strategic to Sprint. Dan Hesse pretty much said that mobile healthcare is going to be one of the driving forces of our industry. So what can we do to find the most up-and-coming companies, bring them to Kansas City, incubate them, and then follow them? But really, it was a numbers game for Sprint. I don't know if Doug shared all this, did he? Am I totally repeating what Doug said? We'll see. Okay. You know, 400 companies applied, and Sprint didn't just shove them aside. They're following all 400 because this group of people are the ones that are going to revolutionize the industry. It ain't a big telco that's going to do that. So they're following very closely. And a handful of them, they put a financial investment into. We worked with each one of them to convince them that Kansas City was the place they should launch their company. 2 of them stayed. And by the way, none of them were from Kansas City. This time around, we're hoping to get some Kansas City companies into this because what Sprint offers with Techstars is a global mentorship base. One of the key factors of why Silicon Valley is so successful at creating and starting companies is access to mentors. It is not access to capital. That's usually an afterthought. So if you would ever want to be involved mentoring a startup, it is such a cool experience because you learn alongside. And many of you are educators, you know that when you teach, you learn too. And they are so thankful. And the great thing about Kansas City is that people are accessible. And that's a very unique thing. So if you have access to somebody that can help advance their business, you're a huge, huge help to them and a great mentor in doing that. So if you ever want to be involved, the Sprint Accelerator is a great way to do that. And then a couple other things too. So the companies that stuck around, I think probably Doug mentioned FitBark, which is you know, the Fitbit for your dog, which is just hilarious to me. They stuck around pretty strategically because of the animal health corridor being here in Kansas City. If you didn't know, over 30% of, or I'm sorry, it's way more than that, but let's say it's 30% today, of global revenue occurs between Manhattan and Columbia. So in the entire industry, global revenue occurs between Manhattan, Kansas, and Columbia, Missouri. And that's the animal health corridor. It's actually a partner organization of ours, and it was a marketing initiative of the Kansas City Area Development Council. They looked at that area and said, holy cow, the data proves that the industry really lives and is in Kansas City. Let's share that with the rest of the world. And that's what we're doing with technology. And having Sprint take the effort to launch this accelerator is another feather in our cap too. So they launched this in the Crossroads, which Sprint has obviously a very beautiful multi-billion-dollar corporate facility over here. Not necessarily fertile ground for startups. And I think that was a big cultural thing for them was they wanted to be where the startups were. And so like any good company, they did research. And they found that they were almost all located there in the Crossroads. And so they've really become a driving force for that neighborhood to be a home for many, many startups. Now, real estate's, the cost has driven up significantly since then, but there's other places for companies too. If you know somebody launching a company, there are a ton of resources in this community to help them go. There's organizations called Digital Sandbox, which gives you a little bit of seed stage funding. A large portion of the companies that were in there were healthcare based. And that's very important because that's, again, playing to the strengths of our region. A couple other ones I'll mention too, like Think Big, SparkLab, Beta Blocks, Pipeline, which is really for companies that are kind of on their way and probably already have some revenue and funding. And that's a fellowship. And every single one of these, one of their biggest competitive factors is mentorship. So there's a lot of ways for you to get involved in these different accelerators. But these are really sort of the main ones because we could honestly use more in Kansas City. There's really not a home for all of our startup activity. There's a lot going on, and we could probably use 10 more of these, to be honest with you. But again, the big value they provide is access to mentorship, not access to capital. That's often a misnomer about startups is all they need is money. Eventually, they're going to need some money. But there's a whole process they go through before that. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And I'm going to talk about healthcare. Anybody here from Cerner? Oh, then I can just speak freely then, right? I can't. I'm being videotaped, I'm pretty sure. Cerner is one of our biggest investors. And we're very lucky because We're one of the few organizations that they're members of, and we take that with a privilege because they're very hard on us. They want to see results. They want to see us move the needle in Kansas City because they're going to hire a ton of people over the next couple of years. And you've probably seen that they've announced that they'll be launching this big campus out in Bannister area. And I just want to take a second to give the founders of this company the credit that is due. These guys could have moved the company anywhere, and they chose to keep it in Kansas City. They've consistently brought the most talented people from the institutions around this region to Kansas City, and they kept them here. They paid them well. They allowed them to have the freedom and flexibility they needed to stay at that company. Granted, they've lost people along the way, and you find them coming right back to Cerner. They've created a culture that is definitely a culture that if you don't buy in, you better get out, but they reward the heck out of you. They've got their own healthcare plans, and anyways, but they're really driving our healthcare technology business because they have brought the best minds in that industry to this city, and they've stayed. Some of them have left and launched businesses. And there was a tech map that the Kauffman Foundation had over the last 30 years that basically showed the companies that were formed and then the companies that people from that first, like a sprint, the companies that they formed after. And many of our educational institutions led that way, and then it kind of stopped, and then it was Sprint, Cerner, Garmin, Perceptive. All those companies were the main first stop for people to get trained, educated, and then they went on to do their own thing. And as the founders of this company start to transition, which we would think would happen in the next 10 years, I would make a bet today that a large part of their passion going forward is helping more and more companies become the next Cerner. But they're really the nucleus of that healthcare IT business right now. And again, they're providing a lot of the talent that work at many of the other companies in the region. They know that that's sort of the role they play. They don't love that by any means, but they're a very important part of that. Switch gears again. I want to make a little bit of a plug for an event that we have coming up here on Thursday, November 20th, called Reverse Pitch. This is a pretty unique event for us that we host every year during Global Entrepreneurship Week, but it allows us to go out to some of the big corporations and we actually convince them to pitch like entrepreneurs. So this year, companies like Sprint and DST, and last year, I got a list of the ones that participated. Oh, sort of, it's kind of cut off. But so we had the chiefs participate, Sprint, DST, H&R Block, and UMKC. And each one of those executives got up in front of a stage, about 250 innovators, entrepreneurs, and technologists, and basically said, we got a problem we can't solve. If you can, we'll pay you. And it was really cool because they got responses of things they'd never heard of before. And we're doing it again. And there'll be some of the same companies, like I can tell you that Sprint and DST are going to be participating, but then a couple other companies I can't share yet. But Thursday, November 20th, registration is open. If you want to go, I would highly encourage students, faculty, professionals, check this out. One of the coolest things you learn is that you know, specifically from the horse's mouth, what they're interested in. And they will share openly their strategic priorities, and it's going to be really cool. And we have a very diverse group of companies that are participating this year, so it's going to be fun to participate in or go to, I should say. We also create an online portal. And for those that are educators, this would be great projects for students. We'll record each of their pitches. We'll put them online, so if you missed the event, you can still see them. And you can respond directly back. And the minute you respond back, it goes directly to the decision maker, no middleman. We cut all that out. So you get direct access to the people that have the purse strings and the decision-making capability to have a meeting. And so last year, the chiefs pitched this problem they had with parking. I'm not taking credit for what's happened this season at all. But last year they said, you know, we have this problem. We know it's a problem. And we know it's part of the fan experience. We know technology can solve it. There are 75,000 cars that come into Arrowhead. We have 6 entrances, but people only use 2. Everyone has their back road into Arrowhead. It's not the right way. If they looked at a map, if they really thought about it, it's not the right way in, it's not the right way out. And we know that we can't take credit cards at these terminals that you go into, so you got to pay cash. And that's a problem for some folks. They don't have it, or they forget, or they just didn't know. It's not cheap. We know that too. So they pitched this whole thing. They gave you all the data, said if you got a solution to this problem, let us know. Well, this created quite an overflow of recommendations to the Kansas City Chiefs. And it hasn't been announced yet, but I'm fairly certain that they've signed a deal with a local Kansas City company to solve some of those problems. And this season was kind of phase 1, where they could flow traffic in certain ways. And I haven't been out there, but I heard it's not so good. No, I was going to fess up. Okay. Heard it's not so good. But in the future, it's going to be like a K-tag. You have the technology in your car, and you just go right through your gate. It's not anyone else's gate, it's your gate. And that's the one you enter from, and that's the one you exit from. So anyways, that was an example of one of the pitches last year. And that's really the role that we play. Because we have all these companies in our organization locally, the role that we play is connecting them. The biggest value to being a member of our organization is access. You get access to companies, educators, talent, and all of that. And we provide it whether you're a member or not. That's not important to us. We're in the community business. We know eventually we help you, it's going to come our way too. And then externally, we show the companies what's going on in Kansas City. And when they come here, we put on a heck of a show. And it's really a lot of the work that you're doing. We're telling the stories of the folks that are in Kansas City. So I will pause there and answer any questions that you guys have. No? Food coma setting in? Okay. Yeah.
The event you got, the reverse event coming up.
Yeah.
Geared towards services and product providers making their pitches. We're a healthcare organization.
Yep.
Has there ever been a consideration of focusing around one industry?
Yes.
And healthcare provider, or hospital systems, or whoever coming in and pitching their biggest problem and doing that?
I would love to do that. And I say that because that's, again, one of the most important industries in our region. And we would open that up. And I think specifically when it's industry focused, and we would maybe want to do that alongside when a lot of those professionals are going to be in Kansas City. I know there's a larger HIMSS conference that goes on in the region, right? I want to say something.
No,
okay.
Not really.
But
there's the national conference.
Let's bring it to Kansas City. But either way, we would love to do that. And so we, what's funny is,
our convention center will not house.
So let's take a long-term approach to that one. You know, the interesting thing about reverse pitch is that we work with each one of these companies. Believe it or not, they don't know how to do this stuff sometimes. And it's been a really cool experience because they don't ever get on a stage and say, they're always the expert, right? But there are big industry issues in each one of these companies. Like, for example, last year, H&R Block, they said everyone knows that we do tax preparation, right? But what they don't know is we're really good at processing large amounts of data and documents. And we know in healthcare, we know specifically that with some of the initiatives going on there that we could play a significant role in that world, and that's what they pitched. They said, we know how to do tax, we don't know how to do healthcare, but we know we can do the back end, so who wants to help build a front-end product for H&R Block? And they got tons of responses from that. And that's the kind of stuff that we would want to do. And we work with them specifically because we want them to be able to specifically discuss the problem and how to work with companies like H&R Block or hospitals. Working with hospitals is totally different than any other company, right? And people need to know the things you have to be prepared for when you work with a hospital. And that's a big part of it. If people get a deal out of reverse pitch, cool. The main point is that it's educational. So if we could do something like that, we would love to. Great question. Anything else? Oh, sorry, do you have one? Oh. Okay, well, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.